Alright guys, what's going on? It's Cynical, welcome back to another one. In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about Square Enix, as we've got some interesting information to go over regarding their Q3 financial earnings report for investors. It's not doom or gloom, but it's certainly not great news. At the beginning of the year, we were talking about the status of the company from the previous report, and it was made apparent through that report that over the past sort of couple of years, Square Enix hasn't been performing the best. Certainly not at a complete loss or to a point where we should all be concerned for the well-being of the company itself, but still, things have not been going the best, certain games not meeting expectations, along with multiple projects that were in development basically cut. Also, at the beginning of the year, there was brand new leadership taken into effect. Takashi Kiryu, a significantly younger person to take on the presidential role of Square Enix as a company. This also came with the announcement that there is going to be a brand new business direction for the company, and one of the important things that was mentioned for Square at the beginning of the year was that Square are going to aggressively pursue multi-platform. The big takeaway from this recent information is that HD game profits are down, and Square Enix explained that this is due to the lack of major game releases throughout 2024 in comparison to last year, where the company had Final Fantasy 16 and Pixel Remaster. This means that the HD games section of Square is actually operating at a loss of 1.2 billion yen, though it is better in comparison to Square Enix's last fiscal year, where HD games were bleeding out a loss of 3.6 billion yen. They also mentioned that profits for games for mobile phones or the PC browser, so basically their live service related products, all profits towards those are down due to a lack of new content within this space. The operating income for the mobile game section is at 4.8 billion. This is about half of where it was at for last fiscal year, coming in at 9.7. Their net sales for their games department over the past 6 months compared to the same period of time for last year is down by almost 20%, although their operating income is up by 8%. The MMO section of Square Enix though is doing fine, though this does make sense as Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail released this year, sitting at 13.1 billion yen for operating income. So HD games, let's first of all talk about that, because we went into 2024 basically knowing that, yeah, this is probably going to be quite a quiet year for Square Enix. The biggest releases for Square this year, number one, of course, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That is their biggest heavy hitter, and there's not really any other game that follows to the same level of hype as Rebirth. Otherwise, we've had Dragon Quest III HD 2D, as well as Visions of Mana. So if you look at the profits made for 7 Rebirth compared to something like Visions of Mana, Dragon Quest, or something like Romancing Saga, they're gonna come nowhere near even close, even though those other games have released multi-platform. Here's the kicker though, it's also been made apparent from Square Enix that looking at 7 Rebirth, along with last year's Final Fantasy 16, which was also met with a bit of a loss as it didn't hit expectations, both of those games just didn't perform to the degree that Square were hoping. And this is hence why the company decided to make a complete change in the direction of where and how they release their games, being that going forward, their games will be multi-platform. So no more timed exclusivity deals, because the company is going to generate that much more profit when you release a game on all platforms on day one, on launch of the game, compared to bringing it to a platform many months or even years later. And this has been made apparent by the release of Final Fantasy 16 on Steam. The game has still sold almost about 300,000 copies on Steam, so it's not a terrible figure or anything like that. But still, this would have been a much higher number if 16 had released on Xbox, PlayStation, and the PC platform on launch. We know that PlayStation's timed contract with Square Enix is tight when it comes to Final Fantasy VII. This means that Square will likely still have to release the third part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy on PlayStation 5, or likely PlayStation 6, in 2027, 2028. And that if Final Fantasy VII Remake is anything to go off of, that took about a year and a half for Square Enix to release it on PC, meaning that for Rebirth, it won't be until sometime next year, late next year, that we see Rebirth finally coming to Steam and Epic. This has been making me think about Kingdom Hearts 4 in regards to it releasing multi-platform for whenever that happens. Will we see a day one release of that game for all platforms? Yes, even including PC, which would be very different for the series. Square Enix's mention of profits being down for mobile phone live service games is also not surprising, because over the past few years, they have been going on almost a killing spree of their mobile phone entries. It has to make you think, are they generating enough income to actually keep them sustainable? Otherwise, okay, sure, the story of some of these services ends, so narratively speaking, there's nowhere else to go. But if these games were generating so much income, there's no way they would just let them die. And remembering that Square Enix at one point had so many mobile phone live service games, it was almost like we were drowning in them. And this is a result of the big mobile gaming boom that started in the early 2010s. For a while there, a lot of developers set their sights on mobile game development. To have a game that requires less resources for the company but can continually generate revenue. Because this type of thing started to shift over into higher quality gaming for PC and consoles, what we now call live service titles, people's interest towards those mobile phone live service games are starting to dwindle. Now, I was let know about some information from an anonymous source about 2 months ago. There was some stuff that was mentioned about Kingdom Hearts and how certain things are coming. It's quiet because there's a lot cooking behind the scenes. But there was a mention towards Missing Link and how it has been delayed internally, just that Square Enix is still yet to make the public announcement. The reason why there has been a lot of silence surrounding Missing Link is looking at Square Enix's mobile games department. There has been a lot going on there in regards to games just not pulling their weight and not generating enough profit so that they can remain online and development for them can continue. It wouldn't surprise me if Missing Link has taken on some type of revision, and I'm not saying cancelled overall and turned into an HD console title, although that is the dream, but more so certain aspects of the game perhaps change to ensure that this is going to be a certain type of cash cow for Square, and that Square are able to maintain it for many years going forward. Don't get me wrong, the mobile game section of Square is still very profitable, and that much can be seen from the recent financial report. But it's absolutely a trend of Square Enix's to shut down a mobile service after consecutive years of the game not bringing in income, with it declining. As an example, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius has been one of Square Enix's most successful mobile games, generating close on $900 million US. It almost got to the age of 10 years old, but because there was a big decline in income being generated through the service, the game was shut down this year. And obviously, the same can be said with a whole handful of other Square Enix mobile services. Missing Link is without a doubt one of the most ambitious mobile games that Square Enix have ever pursued. The only other one that I can think that kind of comes close to it is Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier, which we all know how that went. That was a huge flop. A lot more resources has to go into the development of something like Missing Link or a big fully blown 3D mobile phone game. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is doing pretty well, though it hasn't been around too long, but it will certainly have a longer lifespan than something like The First Soldier. The question though is, how long? Like, how can Square Enix keep people engaged playing the same mobile phone game for years to come, especially when there's only so much narrative you can put into these titles? So I think that Square Enix really are taking their sweet time with Missing Link to ensure that it is going to be a service that can stick around for many years and won't flop as hard as The First Soldier did. There's also been some interesting stuff going on towards the total value of Square Enix as a company. Looking at its market cap, it is currently sitting at about 7.3 billion. Since about May of last year, investors have been seemingly pulling in and out, but more out than in, and the total value of the company has sort of been on the decline. While it certainly does spike up when major releases like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or, of course, Final Fantasy XVI release, when investors are seeing that the profits turned over from the releases of these big AAA games aren't exactly meeting target, it then causes the investors to lose faith in Square to see the money returned back to them. And it was reported this year that a lot of investors are unfortunately not too thrilled with Square Enix's future project pipeline, as major releases for the company are going to be relatively quiet for the next coming year. It's important to know that market value is always rising and always dropping. This is just the nature of it, and there's so many different contributing factors, it's not black and white. But it was only a day ago where the market value of Square Enix dropped by 350 million. So again, it would seem that investors' faith in Square Enix is dwindling. Now, I have seen a lot of people online reacting to this recent financial report, basically saying that the new leadership that's been put in place, Takashi Kiryu, is simply not doing a good job, which is pretty insane because it's not just overnight where all of these changes that is put into effect by new leadership currently takes place. This is the sort of thing where we won't actually start to see the results of Kiryu's new leadership for a couple of years yet. The announcement of all of these new plans from the new leadership is exciting. This is definitely the direction that Square Enix need to go in. And I think it was a pretty good move on Square Enix's behalf. And again, I don't know if this is coming from Kiryu himself, but canceling all of those projects they just didn't see were viable or would end up returning the profits made back from the money being put in to develop them, because Square Enix over the past 5 to 6 years have unfortunately been funding a lot of garbage. It's important to keep in mind Square Enix are not on dire straits, so don't freak out there. However, these aren't great stats, but I do believe that the past couple of years have been quiet years, a quiet period of time for the company. This is why Takashi Kiryu mentioned that this new era of Square Enix is deemed as reboot and reawaken. Let them silently work away in the background. There's going to be some sticky stats coming through here and there, but I do have faith, and this is probably not cynical enough of me, and more so optimistic of me, but I do have faith that they can start to turn some things around. Final Fantasy XVI was a great time along with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, two fantastic titles. Everything else that's coming out in between these big AAA releases, some are good, but unfortunately a lot of them just aren't. I'm excited for Square Enix's future, so long as they can stick to what they know they should be doing. Kingdom Hearts. Release Kingdom Hearts. If you want money, release Kingdom Hearts! Or at least just tell us that Missing Link's been delayed. Because that'll, instill more faith into you guys if you were to just tell us. Let us down here. Just fucking tell us! However, that's the current status of Square. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out my other garbage social media platforms. A big thank you to my wonderful patrons. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk real soon.